Talk about the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus is the part of the diencephalon. It is the basal part of the diencephalon. Diencephalon consists of three structures: the thalamus, the hypothalamus, and the epithalamus. Here is the structure. This is the thalamus. This one located right here is the hypothalamus, and this structure located on this side, that is on the posterior side, is the epithalamus. The epithalamus constitutes of the pineal gland, the habenular cells, and the posterior commissure. These are the three structures which together constitute the epithalamus. This is the general diagram of the hypothalamus. It consists of a large number of nuclei. We will be looking at each of these nuclei further. This structure, this is the thin structure located right here, is called the lamina terminalis, and this bulge or protuberance of the lamina terminalis on the anterior side is called the anterior commissure. These are all the different nuclei of the hypothalamus. This is the lamina terminalis. This is the pituitary gland which is connected to the hypothalamus through this stalk called the infundibulum. This is the very good diagram of the hypothalamus which indicates all of the structures. This is the fornix, which is the connection between the hippocampus and the hypothalamus. This structure is the corpus callosum, which divides the cerebrum into two cerebral hemispheres. This structure, as I already told you, is the lamina terminalis, and these are the nuclei. We'll be looking at each of these nuclei in detail. These all which are highlighted in yellow are the nuclei of the hypothalamus, and this is the anterior commissure, as we have already seen this. Now the hypothalamus can be divided into four main zones which contain different nuclei. So the first zone is the preoptic zone. This contains the medial preoptic nucleus. The second zone is the supraoptic zone, which contains the suprachiasmatic nucleus, supraoptic nucleus, paraventricular nucleus, anterior hypothalamic nucleus. The third zone is the tuberal zone, which consists of arcuate nucleus. This is very important. This has a lot of important functions: ventromedial nucleus and the dorsomedial nucleus. And the fourth and the final zone is the mammillary zone, which contains the mammillary nucleus and the posterior hypothalamic nucleus. So the anterior hypothalamic nucleus is located in the supraoptic zone, and the posterior hypothalamic nucleus is located in the mammillary zone. We'll be looking at their functions later on. So now, since the hypothalamus can be divided into zones, we'll see how are these zones divided. So this zone right here is the preoptic zone. We have seen the first zone is the preoptic zone, which contains the medial preoptic nucleus. The second zone here is the supraoptic zone, which contains the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the supraoptic nucleus, and the paraventricular nucleus, as well as the anterior hypothalamic nucleus. So as you can see, here is the paraventricular nucleus, this is the anterior nucleus, and this is the supraoptic nucleus, this one located right here. So this whole structure is the supraoptic zone. The next zone is the tuberal zone. Similarly, the tuberal zone is located right here, and the last zone is the mammillary zone, which is located here. This bulgy protuberance out of the hypothalamus in its basal side is called mammillary nucleus, and it contains this mammillary body. All right. So let us look at the functions. Main basic functions of the hypothalamus include the autonomic nervous system, the endocrine system, and the limbic system. That is, the hypothalamus has roles to play in all of these three systems. It has an important role to play in the autonomic nervous system. We'll look at this later. First we'll see the limbic system, then the endocrine system, and then the autonomic nervous system. How hypothalamus influences all these systems. So first of all, let us start with the limbic system. As you already know that the limbic system is consisting of the hippocampus and the amygdala. The hypothalamus has specific connections with both of these structures. The mammillary body is the first of all, let us see what the mammillary body does, and then we'll see how it plays an important role in maintaining a connection between the hypothalamus and the hippocampus, which is the part of the limbic system. So the mammillary body is responsible for episodic memory and reflects with olfaction, right? So this is the connection, the Papez circuit, which is present between the hippocampus and the mammillary body and back to the hippocampus via the cingulate gyrus. So this structure, which is shown in pink here, is the cingulate gyrus. So how is the connection between hippocampus and mammillary body formed? So this is the hippocampus. This structure, which is passing in green color right here, is the fornix. this fornix passes directly to the mammillary body, and from the mammillary body again a tract passes towards the this disc, this central disc, and from that it passes into the cingulate gyrus back towards the hippocampus. In this way the circuit kind of structure is completed. That's why it is called the Pappage circuit. Now the amygdala is connected with the hypothalamus with this structure called the stria terminalis. Basically it is a tract through which the amygdala is connected with hypothalamus. Now let us see the important functions of the arcuate nucleus of the hypothalamus. First of all, let's recapitulate where the arcuate nucleus is located. The arcuate nucleus is located in the tuberal zone. The tuberal zone has three nuclei: the arcuate nucleus, the ventromedial nucleus, and the dorsomedial nucleus. Alright. Arcuate nucleus, ventromedial nucleus, and dorsomedial nucleus. So let us see how they play an important role in influencing the limbic system. So this is the arcuate nucleus. It releases alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone and nucleoprotein type Y and all the other several other chemical factors which of which the names you need to remember. It releases this alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone and it acts on the ventromedial nucleus. This in turn releases the CRH, which is the corticotropin releasing hormone, which is responsible for maintaining a state of satiety in the human body, which is the feeling of fullness that you need not eat any further. And the other chemicals which are coming from the arcuate nucleus act on the lateral hypothalamic nucleus. These were acting on the ventromedial nucleus, and this acts on the lateral hypothalamic nucleus, and which releases certain kind of important substances which are called orexins. The ventromedial nucleus under the action of alpha melanocyte stimulating hormone releases corticotropin releasing hormone, and the lateral hypothalamic nucleus under the action of the arcuate nucleus releases the orexins. These are responsible for stimulating hunger. These were responsible for stimulating a feeling of satiety, that is the feeling of fullness, but these orexins help to stimulate a feeling of hunger in the human body. Now let us look at this. Whenever there is an increase in fat storage in the body, the hormones called leptins are released. Whenever there is increased concentration of glucose inside the body, the hormone insulin is released, as you all know. Whenever there is a stretch in the gastrointestinal tract, which means there is food present inside the gastrointestinal tract, then the signals pass directly through the cranial nerve 10th, which is the vagus nerve. Whenever you are in a state of fasting, you have been fasting for 1 or 2 days, then a hormone called ghrelin is released in the body. So let us see how these hormones play an important role. So the hormone leptin acts positively on this system, that is which is helpful in maintaining satiety. For example, if you have a lot of fat storage, so the body starts releasing leptins. Leptins act positively on this system so that you will have a more intense feeling of satiety, so that you will not eat any further, because there is already a lot of fat which is present inside your body at the moment, alright, which is not digested. In the same way, if you have a lot of glucose, insulin will also act positively on this satiety maintaining center or satiety maintaining pathway, which will enhance the feeling of satiety so that you will not eat more. Similarly, if there is food present in the gastrointestinal tract, if the gastrointestinal tract is stretched because of the presence of food, the cranial nerve 10th, which is the vagus nerve, will also enhance this satiety center. All right, so all these structures, all these hormones will help in enhancing the feeling of satiety so that you will not eat any further. All right, now the hormone ghrelin, as I already told you, is released in the state of fasting, which means that you have not taken food. So this will act positively on the lateral hypothalamic nucleus, which will stimulate the release of orexins and which will force you to eat food, that is it will increase the hunger feeling inside your body. Any damage to the ventromedial nucleus, that is the loss of satiety, which will lead to obesity, that you will eat a lot, you will never be satiated, you will never feel a state of fulfillness if you have a damage in the ventromedial nucleus. So you will have a feeling of condition called obesity, which is caused due to hyperphagia, that is a lot of eating. Damage to the lateral hypothalamic nucleus in infants, it results in failure to thrive, that is they will not feel hungry to eat, and in adults this condition is called anorexia nervosa. Now let us see what happens if there is a damage to the dorsomedial nucleus. The dorsomedial nucleus is a structure which is located right here in between the ventromedial nucleus and the lateral hypothalamic nucleus. The dorsomedial nucleus, is responsible for maintaining controlling the behaviors of the human body. So any damage to the dorsomedial nucleus results in savage behaviors, as dorsomedial nucleus controls the behaviors of our human body. Now let us see what happens if there is a damage to the mammillary body. We have already seen the function of mammillary body previously, that is, it helps in maintaining the reflex, olfactory reflexes, and episodic memory. So the damage to the mammillary body will result in Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome. This is a very important syndrome in which there is a feeling of confabulation. There is a state of confabulation, that is, pieces of memory are lost and people fill them with those things that are not real. Suppose they have a memory of a certain event, but the certain parts of that memory are lost, that is, the pieces of memory are lost, and people fill them with their own new things which are not reality. All right, so this is called the state of confabulation, which is present in Wernicke-Korsakoff syndrome, which is caused into the damage in the mammillary body. Now let us move on towards the endocrine roles of the hypothalamus. So these are the endocrine roles. These roles you must be already aware from the lower classes, that this is the arcuate nucleus. We have already talked about the arcuate nucleus. This acts directly on the hypophyseal portal system, which is drained into the anterior pituitary. This is the infundibulum, this is the anterior pituitary, this is the posterior pituitary. So the arcuate nucleus helps in making releasing factors and inhibiting factors of hormone. For example, it releases growth hormone releasing hormone. So this acts on the somatic cells which are present in the anterior pituitary, which will release the growth hormone. Similarly, corticotropin releasing hormone will act on these cells and they will release adenocorticotropic hormone, which will help in releasing cortisol from the adrenal gland. Alright. So the other medial preoptic nucleus, which was also which is also an important nucleus. This medial preoptic nucleus has a specific function, that is, it helps in releasing the gonadotropin releasing hormone. All the other releasing and inhibiting hormones were released from the arcuate nucleus, but specifically the gonadotropin releasing hormone are released from the medial preoptic nucleus. So because of the gonadotropin releasing hormone, which stimulates the further release of FSH and LH. Now, since the medial preoptic nucleus functions differently between males and females, because the FSH and LH definitely will have different functions in males and females, it is also called the sexually dimorphic nucleus. You have to remember this, that the medial preoptic nucleus is also called the sexually dimorphic nucleus of the hypothalamus. Now let us see the posterior pituitary, which is under the direct neural regulation of the hypothalamus. As we have seen that these are the paraventricular nucleus and this is the supraoptic nucleus. They have their axons penetrating directly into the posterior pituitary. That is, they do not need this kind of portal system which was needed in the case of anterior pituitary. So this is the supraoptic nucleus, which is responsible for maintaining water balance inside the body. If there is any change in the water balance of the body or pressure conditions of the body, this will release the hormone called antidiuretic hormone. We can also call this vasopressin, which is responsible for vasoconstriction and water reabsorption from the renal tracts. All right, it will increase the reabsorption of water from the renal tract. Now let us look at this paraventricular nucleus. This also has an important role in releasing the hormone called oxytocin. This oxytocin is responsible for uterine contractions as well as the milk ejection. It is also called the milk letdown hormone. So let us look at the little bit of theory. The increasing osmolarity as well as the hormone called angiotensin 2 can stimulate the supraoptic nucleus to release vasopressin. We have already talked about this. Angiotensin 2 will see in renin-angiotensin aldosterone system. That is, the increasing amounts of angiotensin 2 which are coming from the lungs helps in stimulating the release of the vasopressin or the antidiuretic hormone. The paraventricular nucleus is stimulated by suckling or the uterine stretch. This releases the oxytocin, which causes the uterine contraction as well as the milk ejection. So these are the functions of the paraventricular nucleus, that is, it releases oxytocin, which is responsible for uterine contraction and milk ejection. Now let us see at the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This is connected with the pineal gland as well as the retina for receiving light signals. So what happens is, it receives the light signals from the retina, whether it is day or whether it is night, and then it sends the signals to pineal gland, which releases the hormone called melatonin, which is responsible for sleep and wake cycle. You have already know that the pineal gland releases melatonin, which is important for maintaining the circadian rhythm of the body. Any damage to this pathway causes insomnia. That is, you'll not be able to sleep properly. Now let us see the autonomic roles, the roles of the hypothalamus in the autonomic system. First of all, there are only two nucleuses of the hypothalamus which play an important role in autonomic nervous system. That is the anterior hypothalamic nucleus and the posterior hypothalamic nucleus. The posterior hypothalamic nucleus stimulates the sympathetic nervous system, and the anterior hypothalamic nucleus stimulates the parasympathetic nervous system. So let us see how. So this is the anterior hypothalamic nucleus. From the anterior hypothalamic nucleus, a direct tract passes to the sacral parts and to the superior parts of the cranial nerves. All right. So first of all, let us see how it helps in stimulating the parasympathetic nervous system. So these are the separate nuclei called Edinger-Westphal nucleus, which forms the connection between the tract of neurons coming from the anterior hypothalamic nucleus and the cranial nerve 3. So the nucleus which forms the connection between the cranial nerve 3 and the tract coming from the anterior hypothalamic nucleus is called Edinger-Westphal nucleus. The next one, which forms the connection between the neurons coming from the anterior hypothalamic nucleus and the cranial nerve 7th, which is the facial cranial nerve, is called superior salivatory nucleus. Similarly, the third one, which forms the connection of the tract of neurons and the cranial nerve 9th, which is the glossopharyngeal cranial nerve, is the inferior salivatory nucleus. And this structure, which forms the connection between the cranial nerve 10, is called the dorsal nucleus of vagus, as the name is very clear that it helps in forming the connection between the tracts from the anterior hypothalamic nucleus and the vagus nerve. That is why it is called the dorsal nucleus of vagus. This structure, which is located here, right here, is called the reticular formation. We'll look at its function a little bit of later. Now here the second part, which is the posterior nucleus of the hypothalamus, is located, which helps in stimulating the sympathetic nervous system. Before that, let us see at this small structure which is located right here, which is called the nucleus of tractus solitarius, which is responsible for passing the gustatory stimulations or the gustatory sensory informations towards the hypothalamus. That is the informations of taste towards the hypothalamus via this pathway. It has a separate pathway which is running adjacent to the pathway of the anterior hypothalamic nucleus to the different parts of the cranial and the sacral pathways. The sacral pathway of the neurons coming from the anterior hypothalamic nucleus run from second sacral to fourth sacral vertebrae, and they are called preganglionic parasympathetic nervous system neurons. All right. Now let us talk about this. The posterior hypothalamic neuron, which is responsible for maintaining the sympathetic nervous system, it has only one pathway, that is it runs from first thoracic vertebrae to the second lumbar, directly to the second lumbar vertebrae, and these are called preganglionic sympathetic nervous system neurons. So this was all about the role of the hypothalamus in the autonomic nervous system. Now let us look about how it helps in maintaining the thermoregulation of the human body, because hypothalamus is also called the thermostat of the body. So anterior hypothalamic nucleus helps in decreasing the body temperature, and the posterior hypothalamic nucleus helps in increasing the body temperature. Why? Because we have already seen the anterior hypothalamic nucleus is responsible for maintaining the parasympathetic nervous system. Since in parasympathetic nervous system everything is in a state of cool down, so therefore the temperature of the body also decreases. So it is responsible for vasodilation. It can decrease the temperature of the body in two ways. One is vasodilation and the second is by sweat glands, which have evaporating cooling. All right, if there is more sweat, then there will be more evaporation from the surface of the body, which will generate cool. Now the next is the posterior hypothalamic nucleus, which helps in increasing the body temperature since it is associated with the sympathetic nervous system. So it is responsible for does increase the body temperature by two ways. First is the vasoconstriction of cutaneous blood vessels. Just like there was vasodilation of cutaneous blood vessels, here is vasoconstriction of cutaneous blood vessels, and the second means by which it increases the body temperature is by shivering, inducing shivering in the human body by the visceral muscles. Now this is the last part in which we'll see the hypothalamic connections, how the hypothalamus makes connection with different part of the body. This is the kind of summary. First of all, the connection between hippocampus and hypothalamus and amygdala is called the striae terminalis. Or there is another pathway which is a very minor pathway, which is the connection between amygdala and hypothalamus, which is called the ventral and amygdofugal pathway. This is not at all important. You have to just remember this one. The connection between amygdala and hypothalamus is called striae terminalis. The next is the connection between hippocampus and hypothalamus, which we have already seen earlier, which is called the fornix. The last is the connection between the prefrontal cortex and the reticular formation. We have seen what was the reticular formation. It was this structure which is located right here. This one is the reticular formation. The connection between the prefrontal cortex of the cerebrum, the frontal lobe of the cerebrum, and the reticular formation with the hypothalamus is called median forebrain bundle. This is the name which can be directly asked in certain examinations, so you have to just remember this. The connection between the anterior hypothalamic nuclei and the parasympathetic nervous system, which we were talking about, the tract of neurons, is called dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. So this one, which is highlighted in dark blue color, this one, the connection between the anterior hypothalamic nuclei and the parasympathetic nervous system is called dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. So this structure is called dorsal longitudinal fasciculus. This one, which is located, colored in dark blue. Now the connection between the posterior hypothalamic nuclei and the sympathetic nervous system is called hypothalamic spinal tract. So this tract, which we were seeing in red color, between the posterior hypothalamic nuclei and the sympathetic nervous system from here, is called the hypothalamic spinal tract. So that's all about the hypothalamus. Thank you.